We have breaking news off the coast of Venezuela. The U.S. has started an operation to seize an oil tanker there. That's according to two U.S. officials. And one of those officials tells us the ship has been secured. NBC News senior national correspondent Courtney Kube joins us now with more on this breaking story. So, Courtney, this tanker, formerly known as Bella 1, recently that name changed to the Marinera. It's Russian flagged. Help us understand what that means and what you're learning about this operation.
Right. So it's and at this point, the U.S. still sees it as a stateless vessel. So they don't, at least as of this morning, they still do not acknowledge that it is a Russian flagged vessel. But you'll remember this all started over the holidays more than a week ago, when then the Bella 1 left Venezuela. The U.S. was enforcing this embargo or stopping or blocking ships that were leaving Venezuela that had any kind of sanctions or carrying oil, and they were seizing and interdicting these ships, primarily with the Coast Guard, usually with support of the United States military. But the Bella 1 evaded that. They brushed off the efforts for the U.S. to board that ship and then started making their way towards Europe. Since then, the U.S. has essentially been in pursuit of that tanker. There are reports that Russian naval assets have also joined in and have been essentially escorting that ship. We've been watching now as the U.S. has been pursuing it. Now, officials telling us that they began planning for an operation to actually seize it now that it's in European waters. And in fact, that did occur this morning. One of those officials saying the U.S. seized the Bella 1, that it was a mission that was led by the Department of Homeland Security in support or with support of the United States military, the Department of Defense, and that the Department of Homeland Security actually has the lead. Now, guys, what that pretty much means is that there was Coast Guard involvement. That's what we've seen in these other seizures. Remember, the Coast Guard falls under DHS. And that at this point, there are now U.S. law enforcement officials who are on board of that ship, Joe.
You mentioned those reports that Russia's been escorting this ship. That raises the question, first of all, certainly this will raise tensions between Moscow and Washington. But do we have any idea if there were any incidents, any tensions, any shots fired during this operation?
Yeah, we have no indication of that at this point, but that's one of the questions we're asking. I mean, this has literally just been unfolding in the last hour or two that this interdiction and seizure occurred. Remember, the past several ships that the U.S. has done this since they began this. I mean, essentially what is a naval blockade or oil blockade from Venezuela, they have been done without any kind of real incident. The Coast Guard who are used for this are these elite forces who are very highly trained, specially trained for these sort of dangerous boardings like this. So this is literally what they're trained to do. The U.S. military, so far, we don't know the details of this mission yet today, but so far they've been involved essentially in just bringing the Coast Guard to the ship. So you'll remember that in one of the cases, we saw helicopters bringing men who were in fatigues. They were, heavily kitted up with gear, large weapons. They were U.S. Navy helicopters that actually brought them to the ship, but those were actually Coast Guard, elite Coast Guard forces who did the boarding there, and then in conjunction with law enforcement officials who came on board and were essentially taking over that ship. In some cases, they brought them back to the United States. It's unclear what will happen here because unlike the previous seizures, interdictions and seizures that were done down in the Caribbean or closer to Venezuela, this one is now all the way in European waters. It's almost to Ireland, frankly, at this point. So it's not clear what will happen here. I do expect that United States European Command will have something to say about this later today because it's in their area of operations. If not, we should hear something from the Pentagon at some point today, Joe.
And with these previous oil tankers that were seized, what happened once they were seized?
Well, remember, the U.S. said that the oil now, well, the Trump administration said that the oil now belongs to the United States. So presumably that will happen here. The big difference in this one is, as we said, the Bella 1, they didn't take the boarding. They rejected it, they rebuffed it, and they kept moving. For now days, they've been sailing east towards Europe. The other big difference here is the owner. This is, as you mentioned, a Russian flagged ship. The United States doesn't recognize that. or they haven't up to this point. So it's not clear if that's going to be a factor here or not, that there's a Russian involvement here. We know that the Russians did not want the United States to interdict this shipment, so that could play a big part in what happens to this oil as well. It's hard to imagine the U.S. bringing the tanker all the way back across the Atlantic to the United States, but that's what we saw happen with a previous one where they brought it from the Caribbean up to Texas, and the U.S. now has control of that oil.
All right, lots of questions. Courtney Kube, we'll let you get back to your reporting. Thanks so much for joining us.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.